now. Okay, what I'm sharing now, there's a slideshow, and I'll share these again for the folks who are not on. There's a slideshow and there's an attendance list, one for the steering committee members and one for the attendees. So please, if you could, sign in. We are gonna get started. And this is sign in. So our agenda, we're going to do a roll call, and I see a couple of steering committee members. We'll have a welcome, and then our presentation this month is on enforcement. Then we'll have an update on the town hall planning and direction that's coming up in November, and there'll be a meeting. All right, we've got Brian. How are you, sir? He's almost there. Hey, Brian, how are you? You are just, you're on mute right now, but you're just in time. We're just getting started. All right, so our welcome. Oh,
that's me. But Brian was gearing up. It sounded like to welcome everyone.
I was going to start tap dancing.
Welcome to our September WOCAP meeting with the focus being on enforcement. Next slide, please. West Oakland Link is an exciting infrastructure project that will connect West Oakland, right? Connect our community to eventually Treasure Island, and we're promoting it here. So if you guys are able to come out, by come out I mean join a Zoom meeting on Wednesday, September 12th, we invite you to do so. Okay, so we're going to talk about enforcement. For those of you who are familiar, on August 9th, Schnitzer Steel had a fire, not its first and not its last until something changes. So in terms of WOCAP's advocacy, right, we were able to get the message out quickly about what was happening, right? And thanks to Jess for just that rapid response in terms of the IG and its purpose, right? We went viral in a good way with over 60,000 views, 1,300 likes. Yeah, and we are really excited and grateful that we were able to inform the community and also give them a space to share how they've been impacted. Next, we organized the community, right, and brought residents together to talk about how they were impacted by Schnitzer Steel, followed by an emergency task force where WOCAP demanded, right, that agency leaders come and let us know what they were doing, right, to address what was impacting our community, in addition to a platform for folks to share how they were impacted by that toxic smoke. And so that was the community response. And we do have Paul Grazzini here from the Air District, who's going to talk more about BACMED's response in terms of Schnitzer Steel and what comes next.
I already see a hand up. Richard, before I get going, you want to go ahead and ask your question?
No, from you, Paul, first, and then we'll take all the questions at the end.
Okay, yeah, no problem. So hi, everybody. So I'm the enforcement supervisor for the Oakland area. On the evening of the 9th, I was able to get 2 inspectors. It was after hours, but I was able to get 2 inspectors out to the fire pretty quickly. The first one arrived on scene, I believe around 6 o'clock p.m. and immediately began investigating to the extent we could. We were letting the fire department do their thing. And then the second inspector arrived about 6:20 p.m. And that inspector solely was responding to community complaints. That night, we received about 27 complaints in the immediate time frame of the response. And then over the course of the next, say, 24 hours, we received a total of 50 complaints. The response included we on our air monitoring network throughout the East Bay. We did actually get some pings. Not going to speak to that directly, but I'll speak to the rest of the enforcement stuff. When I say pings, I mean we did read elevated particulate that was in conjunction with what we saw meteorology doing. We're pushing the smoke for the fire. My inspector was able to get a visible emissions to record a visible emissions exceedance. And so we issued 2 violation notices or notices of violation on the 10th, the next day. One was for a public nuisance because that was clearly established. And the second was for both a visible emissions violation, that's basically a particulate matter violation, as well as an illegal fire violation. As of the last few weeks, we've been continuing our investigation into the different aspects of the fire and what Schnitzer's preventative measures either were or should have been. And basically, we're looking at one of the air district regulations. They have an emissions minimization plan with us, or an EMP, you might hear that referred to. And so basically, we've been investigating the fire with regards to compliance with that EMP. And that investigation is just about, and I've been saying this for a few days now, but we are literally ready to finalize that investigation, and we will likely be issuing one more notice of violation for violating that regulation is Regulation 6, Rule 4. So that'll be our next enforcement action there. And then just to go a little bit further and hopefully not too far into the weeds, this will open up the EMP emissions minimization plan for review, and we'll look at imposing some additional requirements for their scrap pile management and fire prevention. So I'm happy to take any questions, and I appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity to share this with you.
Great. We had Richard first and then Miss Margaret.
I think my question might be for Miss Margaret as much as anybody. Richard Grove, former US EPA. Where I left off a while back is I think y'all, West Oakland AIP, anyhow, we're headed for a meeting on Friday, the 25th of August with EPA's emergency response folks, as I understood it. Kind of curious what you learned there, and also whether, I remember from some community meeting, there were questions along the lines of how about emergency findings and shutdowns, that sort of thing. Is there anything actually being done to cease operations until they get things under control? Thank you.
You want to take that?
Paul, his voice is too low, or the volume is too low. I can't hardly hear him.
Oh, okay.
Check
Can
your
anybody else?
volume, Miss Margaret.
Think
Okay.
you want to recap that, Richard?
Sure. Miss Margaret, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. I couldn't
Okay.
hear. I can hear you very, very fast. I just couldn't hear Paul.
Oh, gosh, I'm sorry.
I can answer your question, Richard, if that helps.
Thank you.
Yes, on the 25th of last month, we had a meeting with about 10 agencies. It was convened by US EPA and Cal EPA in their memorandum of understanding, their joint enforcement effort that they set up a couple of years ago. This is the first real emergency response action that task force has had on it to work with. We had those two agencies plus the Water Board, Air District, CARB, DTSC, the city attorney, county DA, and state attorney general's office represented. I'm trying to think if there was anybody else. There probably might have been other people. It was quite a meeting, probably 35 people. Each of the agencies went through a brief presentation describing the nature of their authority. There was significant discussion on the part of the agencies about the amount of material held on site and whether the company should be holding so much material on site, how their oversight, their security and cameras work, and the fact that this pile that caught fire was sort of a extra pile. There was discussions of the fact that the company had a breakdown of their shredder, but they just kept taking in material, and so that's why they had to have an extra pile. That pile didn't have any heat sensors on it, and so there was no one really watching when it caught fire. These are my understandings of the thing. Paul's nodding like I've hit it. I'm doing okay so far. And there was a real strong desire on all the agencies present to find a way to deal with this company, to try to get them. And there was discussion of shutting them down, moving them out. We as the community member representatives were very clear on that this appears to be a company that doesn't want to be cajoled into compliance, that they get permits and they violate the permits, they pay fines, and then they have violations again. So that that it was a very rich conversation. It was encouraging at that point to see all of those agencies and authorities. No one was making excuses. No one was suggesting they'd talk to the company and try to get them to cooperate. I think everyone's pretty frustrated. There is a plan for follow-up meeting. Folks, we're going to go away and do some more homework. And if I missed anything, Paul, let me know.
That covered a lot of what I glanced over. I see a question in the chat, but Ms. Gordon, did you have something, or did you need me to repeat something?
Yes, no, I just want to, since I was at the meeting and I was one of the co-facilitators of the meeting, I think the audience need to know, because a business like Mr. Steele does a violation, it does not mean there's a lot of policing authority to lock it up. From any other agencies, they don't have the ability to come and just lock the doors and make them do those things that don't bring harm to the community. That's number one. Number two, not one place, all the violations from each of the agencies is in one place. There's no such thing. There is multiple agency repository of all the violations. And then second of all, the third thing is that each agency has its own form of enforcement. It's not a universal. It's not a one size fit all. They have their own particular way to deal with a violation. And it's not in concert with each other. And it's not, and we also found out when the lawsuit from 2021 went about Snitzer never came out, nor the state attorney's office, nor the DA came out, nor the Bay Air Quality came out, DTSC, nobody came out and told us what was in the settlement. The stuff that the things that Snitzer was supposed to do, not to have another fire.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Margaret. I think there was one thing relative to authority. I think the federal, Richard Grow maybe can correct me on this. I think the federal government and state EPA do have policing authority. And several of the agencies that were present in that meeting on the 25th have the authority to bring nuisance lawsuits against the company. And so there is authority to take legal action, but that is outside of the normal permitting and compliance process. And I think that's where the community is now. Permitting and compliance doesn't seem to be working with this company. And so we're hoping that the various agencies take a stronger stance. There's some questions here from Brent. You want to answer those, Paul? I don't think I know the answer to those issues about.
Yeah, no, sure. So as of right now, the Air District only has the monitoring results, basically the PM monitoring of our own, that from our stationary monitoring, ambient air monitoring network here in the East Bay. The fire department did do some monitoring there at the site, and please don't quote me with this because I don't have it right in front of me right now. I want to say there was some VOC detected in there as well. Beyond that, there wasn't any other emission sampling that occurred during the fire, during the duration of the fire. Emergency workers have personal monitors. My inspectors have 4 gas monitors that they wear. It measures oxygen, CO, hydrogen sulfide, and CO is carbon monoxide, sorry. And LEL, which is lower explosive, basically if you're in an explosive environment. And that's typical of what a lot of emergency workers will have on them. What I will say to that end is that the Air District had been reviewing an emergency response monitoring. This was something that our former executive director tasked our M&M group to do. And along the way, we've had some bureaucracy changes and some things happen within the agency. So that's still a work in progress. What I can tell you, just being part of some of the rapid response meetings, and you know, one of the takeaways from this event, you know, and I'm just going to be candid here, government is what it is, and we all deal with that. And government has a plan, and that plan can sometimes take a little bit more time than everybody wants. And then you have an event like this, which highlights the things that we do well, and it also highlights the things that maybe miss the mark. So I can tell you without doubt that when it comes to emissions sampling for an event like this. I'm pretty sure the air district's working on something going forward. Again, I know it's been a work in progress, and I can't speak too much more for those folks.
And
Okay. Richard, you have a question, or shall we move on? I think we're probably running over on this item.
Brian, it goes to the point you raised. I don't have the answer, but the question I was hoping would come up at that meeting was whether EPA was willing to exercise its authority under Section 303 of the Clean Air Act when they see an immediate and substantial endangerment possibility. They have some sort of authority. I don't know how broad it goes or whatever, but I know that there have been times when they can just tell a plant to stop.
Mm-hmm.
And I have no doubt the attorneys at EPA could find a way not to exercise that authority, but the question I was interested in, and not to tie this gang up any further, but if EPA could provide you deserve an answer. Do they have that authority? Could they exercise it here? And if not, why not? Thank you.
Thank you. We'll make sure we ask them that. They were a little cagey. The EPA reps were a little cagey, and whether they could or couldn't shut them down or padlock the place, but I said, hey, you've done it for places out in the Midwest or somebody dumping crap in a creek somewhere. How much does it take to shut somebody down? But there will be more meetings, and we will continue to update the steering committee. And if necessary, we'll help put an agenda item on a future meeting and make sure folks know what's going on. I'll give it back to you, Randolph.
There we go.
And Richard, can you send some information about what you just said?
Yes, I will. I'll
send it in an email.
I will. I'll send it to West Oakland EIP. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. So we're going to move on to the follow-up. I'm going to rewind just a little bit. We didn't take a roll. There weren't enough people in the meeting, but please, again, if you have not signed in, specifically, especially our steering committee members, please sign in to the steering committee member. And I also wanted to ask if anybody had any problems getting into the meeting. We've had some troubles with Zoom bombers, so we added just another layer of registrations. Hopefully nobody had any problems accessing the meeting. All right, so we're going to move to follow up from August meeting.
That's Nicole.
Yes. Survey results from August, right? So this is just part of the data collection that we want to make sure that we're giving everyone a chance to share how they're experiencing the meeting, and also give us an opportunity to remedy it, right? So we have, right, overall, how satisfied were you with your experience at the steering committee meeting? And for context, this was last month's meeting. To note, we only had 8 participants, right? It says 9, but one of them was a test. So we had 8 participants, and only 3 of them were steering committee members. The reason why that's extremely relevant is because we have 17 steering committee members, right? So my nudge is for the WOCAP steering committee members, right, to make the effort to fill this out so that when we're designing, right, and planning, we're actually targeting the things that that matter to all of you. So from this data, right, from the 8 respondents, 50% of them, which is 4, right, ranked their overall satisfaction as very well, right, and extremely well. And the other 4 respondents ranked it as somewhat well or not at all. Opportunity here for the co-leads, right, is to make sure that we are scaffolding, right, and making these meetings accessible to folks. And we do value that feedback. And it's a learning opportunity for us. So thank you for filling it out for those of you who did.
Okay. Oh, Albertia, I see your hand. Yes. Is it too late to fill it out? Go back and fill it out now, Nicole?
For August, no, I will send that to you directly so you have that. And yeah, would love to hear your voice, Ms. Owens.
Okay. Thank you.
But we'll share a link to evaluate the meeting at the end of each meeting moving forward.
Okay.
So you'll get another link today for tonight's meeting.
Okay. Got it.
Okay, so I realize that says July strategies follow up, but it should probably say August, because I think July we were on break. So, or maybe I'm wrong. I'm confused. Anyhow, for the follow-up on the strategies, we're trying to coordinate with OEHA to better clarify, get more specificity to them of WOCAP's expectations for their strategies. There's been kind of a resurgence of interest in the green jobs and green industry work among our WOCAP group. So we're working with the city's economic and workforce development to kind of bring them in, catch them up to speed, get them involved. The city attorney has that new ordinance that you heard about last time. They are not quite ready to present on it, so they're not here tonight, but they will come in a few months and share what its possibilities are. We have an open seat for the Alameda County Public Health Department because of a retirement, and we are looking to fill their seat. We've reached out to them, haven't heard back, so we will continue to work on that. Maybe Sony, if you know folks, maybe you can help us. And then we have confirmed speakers for the October meeting. At last month's meeting, there was kind of an interest in hearing more about the Oakland Urban Forest Plan and the updates on Prescott greening. So we'll make that sort of the theme for next month and look forward to talking about it. Okay, next slide. So moving into the kind of meat of our meeting tonight, it's enforcement. So the flow of the evening will be to recap what we talked about in April, talk about some community issues. So we have some photo examples of things actually in West Oakland that are potentially some enforcement issues. We'll hear from a number of other agencies about kind of the key issues that came up in April, and then close out with some final thoughts. So go to the April recap, Randolph. You can go next slide. So the key things that we heard from you all were that, we want some more joint enforcement and coordination around enforcement between the agencies, that feels like there's a lack of truck enforcement. The port's appointment system, folks wanted to hear updates on that. The ongoing lunchtime idling issue for trucks. And of course, after hours enforcement, that before 5 a.m. and after 5 p.m. During weekdays, and then all the time on weekends. And then finally, just doing additional outreach and education around enforcement to residents and businesses and truck drivers. Next slide. So those were the things that came up in April. Here's how we're going to address them tonight. So for joint enforcement, Cal EPA's complaint system we found as a potential example to look at some of that multi-agency coordination. For truck enforcement, we'll go over kind of the historic overview, rules, enforcement. We'll hear from the port about their appointment system and from CARB about their June field event. Then for the enforcement update, we'll hear about the Air District's notice of violation tool and report out on discussions about after hours enforcement. And for education and outreach, MEET has been passing out the WOCAP enforcement flyer, or the WOCAP enforcement flyer, but more still needs to be done. And as we're talking, we would love to hear ideas. So as we're going through things tonight, you'll hear speakers, and after each presentation, we'll have a time for Q&A after each speaker. So get ready with your questions. So first, we're going to just talk about on-the-ground enforcement issues, and we'll go to the next slide. Recall this map from the June, I think, steering committee meeting when we were talking about the environmental justice element For the general plan, we mapped out a bunch of issues in West Oakland, and many of the things you guys put on the map were enforcement issues. And I'll just do a quick rundown of what some of those things were. Next slide. So people brought up, you know, a lot of comments around homelessness, garbage, safety issues throughout, especially on the perimeter and near freeways, fires of illegally dumped materials, creating air quality issues, debris along roadways. The freeway underpasses seem to be a hotspot for many health and air quality concerns. The waste treatment plant was called out specifically as kind of impacting quality of life and health in the area, and people want to see it mitigated. Additionally, odors from the metal recyclers are impacting neighbors. The safety of railroad at-grade crossings are concerned. Noise, which is an important health issue for sleep and just overall mental health and stress, is problematic in some areas. And we've been hearing more and more about sideshows and racing. And of course, in the summertime in Oakland, the lack of enforcement around illegal fireworks. All that odor and noise and litter from them is a big issue. So I'm going to pass it on to Albertia. She had some examples. Oh, and I see Miss Margaret's hand. Sorry, Miss Margaret.
I can wait.
Okay, Albertia, I'm passing the mic.
Ms. Alberti.
I'm on mute. I'm here. I was trying to get off mute. Yeah, I wanted to speak about the well, they're not doing sideshows per se. They like to do a lot of donuts. And if you go down Martin Luther King from West Grand to, say, to 32nd, crossing over 27th, every corner you could see where the donuts are. You don't have to look for them. They're just there for you. And that's a big problem because I've heard crashes doing some of those donuts. And even with the crashes, I don't even hear anybody coming to respond to that. People just do what they do and they just go on. So that, well, I understand there was supposed to be ticketing for spectators as well as those that are participating. Now, they say it, but as it seems to be across the board from all governmental agencies, a sense of implementation. You can write down wherever you want, but if it's not implemented, nothing is going to ever happen. So somebody has to care enough to take the time and make sure it can be done. We all know there's a shortage of police and all of this and that, but then again, we can't do it as citizens. We can't go out and implement it. All we can do is report it. So that part lies with the city and OPD and whoever else in collaboration to get it done. And you have homeless encampments from West Grand, just on the other side of the bus bench, because they had to make a move off the bus bench because they had taken all the way to the corner of West Grand down to 25th, and then they pick back up on Sycamore, going under, because that Sycamore goes, there's an underpass under the 980 right there behind the old Sears. And they put the encampment, they moved them all to one side of the street on Sycamore, but they come all the way out to about the middle of the street, so you can't really do two-way. They try to keep it together, but those that are in these encampments, they just kind of, I guess they need more space, so they take what they need. And there's no implementation there. Let me see what else was there. We need to get the stoplight at San Pablo, San Pablo 25th and West, where they kind of merge in together. That's a three-way stoplight. And for those of us that have to sometimes be at that light, sitting a long time, is not safe. It feels a little safer now, but people, you know, you move people out, but they come right back. So it's still, I see where they have created the flashing stoplights in certain areas around us, which I appreciate that. But San Pablo, right at West and 25th, I would like for us to be able to get that change into a flashing stoplight, say maybe after 8 or 9 in the evening. I think people will feel a lot safer, particularly with the number of armed carjackings that's going on. I think that's it. Did I leave something off, Randolph?
Slides also Wood Street.
On San Pablo at 25th and West, they kind of merge together.
Gotcha. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And the lights do hold because it is a 3-way light. So if we could get it to being a flashing red after, say after 8 in the evening, I think people will start feeling a little bit safer.
We're going to move to the follow-up from April before we get to our speakers.
No,
Okay, thank you. Were there any questions about those areas? Okay.
I think Nicole had a few more comments about some photos.
Yeah, these are all recent photos from the last 3 days, and I cross-referenced a lot of my photos with Oakland 311 just to make sure that these concerns aren't living in kind of an insular space, and they're not, right? They're being reported the way that residents are instructed to do so. The challenge that many of us have is what do we do when we report and the enforcement isn't actually happening? And this is right in a street where cars, I believe, are supposed to drive, and at a park. Okay, next slide. This is Wood Street and 24th Street. This is actually from today during a site visit with the West Oakland Link team, which is MTC and Bay Area Transit Authority. We were looking at what this elevated pathway for bicyclists and pedestrians would look like. And this is what we saw, right? A man-made barricade blocking off a city street in a residential area, specifically West Oakland, right? In a neighborhood that we know is consistently and repeatedly just overlooked. So this is also reported on Oakland 311. So again, the question of enforcement. And the last slide, since you know our bread and butter is air quality. This was from Friday, and this is an RV fire. And this is right on Frontage Road in West Grand. Yeah. And that's it for me.
Nicole. Okay, so now we'll get into our presenters. If you go to the next slide. I think we
Excuse
kind
me.
of, go ahead, Miss Margaret.
Too many facilitators. Number one, I can't remember that I did put my hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I saw you put it down. I'm sorry. I thought
I put it down, but I did initially put it up.
my fault.
I understand that we looked at we used the Oakland General Plan map for environment in relationship to enforcement. But the missing element here, we're not supporting residents to understand this is about emission reduction. And the last slide about the fire of the RV was the only thing that related to emission reduction. It's very confusing when we have stuff in here in the agenda that, because we talk about enforcement, it is very confusing when our focus has been on air quality and emission reduction. It's very confusing. To bring in other things is not part of the initial mandate that we're supposed to be working from.
All right, all right. Any more? Ms. Margaret?
I'm finished.
Okay. Okay, we're on to follow-up.
Thanks, Ms. Margaret. I think the way I've understood some of the photo examples and their connection to air quality is that sometimes things get set on fire, and that, you know, combination of burning metals is pretty hazardous, or debris in the road sets fire, like they're fire hazards. And then of course the side shows create a lot of particulate matter. But yeah, it's not as direct as that RV fire for sure. Okay, so I'm gonna just, can you go to the next slide, Randolph? We're gonna hear from all of our speakers. Randolph, next slide. I don't hear anything you're saying.
And to our speakers, if you could refer to Meet's slide, time, yeah, kind of where we were in the presentation.
Okay, so here's our speakers that you're going to hear from tonight, and I'll let them introduce themselves, but I'm going to keep it moving and hand it off to Hasti to share about the Cali EPA complaint system. So after she speaks and gives a quick demo, we'll let people ask her some questions about the tool.
Hello, my name is, can everybody hear me okay? Before I just continue? Thumbs up?
Good.
Yes? Okay, cool. My name is Hasti Javid. I'm the Cali EPA Enforcement Officer for Cali EPA's Office of the Secretary. One of the many programs that I lead is the Cali EPA Environmental Complaint System, which is just an intake system for environmental concerns. One of the things I want to kind of give as a disclaimer before we get into the presentation is that although this is an enforcement related update, the Cali EPA complaint system is not an enforcement tracking system. It's a reporting tool for community members or other agencies that want to make referrals to one of the environmental agencies under Cali EPA to report their environmental concern and to have that environmental concern routed to the appropriate agency for review or for further referral to a local agency. Obviously, the results of those complaint investigations could result in an enforcement action, but that part of it is not tracked through this system. Next slide. So the agencies that are under Cali EPA's umbrella is Department of Toxic Substances Control, the water boards, which would include the 9 regional water boards, Department of Pesticide Regulation, CalRecycle, the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment, and of course, Air Resources Board. So for purposes of this presentation, I'm going to use a few acronyms. So I want to just explain what those are up front. If I say BDO, that means boards, departments, and offices. Those are the state agencies under the Cali EPA umbrella. If I say external agency, I'm referring to an agency that is not within Cali EPA's jurisdiction, such as like code enforcement, housing, or Caltrans. That would not be one of Cali EPA's agencies. If I refer to a Cali EPA partner agency, that is a non-BDO state agency that's still under Cali EPA's jurisdiction. So for example, Air District, who are overseen by CARB. CARB is one of our state agencies, one of our BDO agencies under the Cali EPA umbrella. Margaret, Miss Margaret?
I can wait till you finish. I'm just putting my hand up.
All right, sounds good. Next slide. So just jumping right into it, the complaint system, we have the public intake form, which is where you would report your environmental concern. It contains 4 basic steps, which we'll get into in more detail. So step 1 is going to be the initial complaint category. Step 2, complaint details. Step 3, the complaint contact or the reporting party, or if it's an agency making a referral, the referral agency. And then step 4, the summary. Next slide. So step 1, when you select the complaint category, you can only select one category, but that is what's going to dictate the fields that are going to open up on the next slide for the public intake form. So if you select air, then it's going to open up some very specific air related categories on the public intake form. It's also going to dictate which state agency under Cali PA, the BDO agency, is going to receive the initial complaint assignment. So what agency is going to put eyes on that first once it's submitted. Next category. Step 2 for the complaint details contains the complaint description, complaint location, which is tied to a few other things that we'll get into more detail about, the responsible party, the complaint category specific questions that are dictated by the category you selected in step 1, the date of occurrence, and then it gives you an opportunity to attach additional files as supporting evidence for your environmental concern. Next slide. So before we get into the quick demo, just to kind of walk through how the complaint system works, I wanted to just make note of a few important things. So the complaint location field, it's a text box that auto-suggests addresses as you start typing. It's very important if you do have a complaint location for your complaint, and I understand that sometimes there isn't one, and there's another option for those circumstances. But the complaint location field is tied to our environmental justice tool, Cal EnviroScreen, where it will automatically identify based on the location you enter if the site address is in a census tract that is considered an environmental justice area. So that's one important thing. It also, when it comes to some of our BDO agencies that have a north region or southern region, based on the address you include, will then dictate if it's going to go to, like, for example, DTSC SoCal region or DTSC NorCal region. So for the Cal EnviroScreen location, you enter the site address. It links to our Cal EnviroScreen database, where it then will identify if the census tract for that site address has a Cal EnviroScreen percentile score of 75 or higher. If it does, then it automatically marks that complaint as an EJ complaint or an EJ area. All right, so let's get into a demo. I'm going to share my screen. All right, so this is the landing page for the Cal PA environmental complaint system. These are the step 1 initial categories that you would select. We're going to go ahead and do air for today's demo. Not reporting a spill. You know, say no to refinery. I'm going to have my complaint description. Let's go with Schnitzer. We're going to file a complaint against Schnitzer. Okay, it auto-populated the address here for Schnitzer. See, in the complaint system's used to Schnitzer. All right, I don't need to do the location description since I'm putting in a site address, but you can if you want. Responsible party, Schnitzer Steel. Put them again. What is our air concern? Stationary source. And let's just go with smokes from the fire, even though the fire is already over, just for purposes of this example. We're going to say ongoing occurrence instead of exact date. And then this is where I would put me as the reporting party. Include my email address. And do I want to keep my contact information confidential? For this section, it doesn't matter if you put yes or no. We're going to follow our own policy and keep your information confidential. But sometimes it makes the community member, the public user, more comfortable just to state, like, yes, I want you to keep my information confidential. So that's why we have that option. And then if I want to receive updates as the reporting party on this complaint, then I can say yes. If you say no, it'll opt you out of the email updates. Now I'm going to submit. Oh, I am not an agency, so it'll flag whatever fields you did not complete if they're required. And then here's the summary page, and you'll also get an email if you opted in for updates. You'll also get an email summarizing the information that you entered. And then this is the important piece of information that you want to make note of in the event that you want to reach out to CaliPA or to one of the agencies that got assigned this complaint and ask for a status update. Please reference this comp number so that the complaint staff can look it up. One more thing that I want to show you. In the event as you want to see how many complaints were submitted against Schnitzer Steel, that's something that we can build a report for. And I already looked up Schnitzer in the system on the back end, so this is not available to the public, but this is something that we have access to build in the event this information is needed or wanted. So just running a query for Schnitzer, any complaint that had the word Schnitzer in it, this is what popped up. And you can see there's several of them for the date of the incident. So this is another good way to kind of track, not only track your complaints, but then have a report to demonstrate how many people have complained about this one entity. I will say though, this is not, purpose of this presentation is not to get you to, deviate from whatever reporting tool you're using now. If you're filing your environmental complaints directly with the Air District, it's going to get to the Air District obviously faster than it would if you're going to report it to the CaliPA complaint system, which then gets assigned to Air Resources Board, who will then review the complaint details and then make the referral to the Air District. Right? It's going to take a little bit longer to get to where it would have gotten anyways. However, it's a good way to have accountability, right? So now you have the state agency that knows that the complaint came in, and now they're sending it to the local district, and that's what we call accountability. CARB was very good at like keeping track of the complaints and making sure that the air districts are responding or submitting findings. The one thing though is there's no statutory requirement for any agency to have to report their findings back into the complaint system. Some agencies have a statutory requirement to address complaints as they're reported, but there's nothing that says they have to actually report back into our complaint system. So that's one thing to keep in mind as well. However, several agencies actually do report their findings. Any questions? I know Miss Margaret, you had a question?
Yeah, there's a couple things.
Uh-huh.
There's a couple things. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
All right. One is Cal EPA the repository for all of this agencies under its umbrella for violations and complaints? Are you guys the central repository for all those things?
If they're being reported into our system, then we do have a record of them. We can't make people use the system. It's just another tool for everybody to use. But every one of our state agencies under our umbrella has an account in the system so that we can make those initial assignments.
Okay, I understand each agency has an account. I'm asking who is the tracking and the holder of all the complaints? Is it Cal? Is it your office or whose office? Under
CaliPA maintains the system. That doesn't mean we have a human that's actually reviewing everything and then making those assignments. It's all automated, but we are the owner of the database, CaliPA.
Okay, you are the owner of the database.
Yeah.
And all right, so.
And it's through Salesforce, though. We have a contract through Salesforce that is the platform we use, but we own the system.
Okay, my next question is the complaints filtered through the Cal environmental screening?
The environmental.
You use Cal environmental screening in your presentation. I'm trying to understand how Cal environmental screening is being applied to the complaint.
The Cal environmental screening, you mean?
Yes.
So it's geocoded to the data for Cal environmental screen. So on the back end, it's geocoded. So that's how it's linked. I'm not an IT person, so I can't speak to that. But OEHA is one of our state agencies, so we have access to that information. And then that way we update it as well when they have a new version come out that's based on new data. So on the back end, the two systems communicate with each other through that complaint location field. And that's how it identifies, based on the site address you include, if it's in a census tract that's deemed an environmental justice area.
Okay, then my other question is your data aggregated between a citizen and organization?
Well, what do you mean by that?
Okay, as a citizen, I make a complaint.
Yep.
Then also, I can make a complaint under the West Oakland Environmental Indicators. So is the system set up to take two columns of complaints?
You would be able to identify that in the complaint description, but you could also just submit two separate complaints, one under the organization and one under you as an individual. Does that answer your question?
Say that again.
So you could submit two separate complaints, one as the organization, a representative of the organization, and you can submit another complaint as you as an individual citizen.
And I'm asking you, is that information aggregated for people to understand, your agency to understand that it came from an individual and it came from an organization?
Yeah, and it's going to be based on the information you provide. So there are fields for you to identify. Are you a citizen or an organization? And then we'll know based on the information you input. So yes.
All right. So as the end game, as one of the end games or the outcomes, and since you brought up the word Snitzer, y'all should have ample violations and complaints to support whatever we need to make Snitzer upgrade or close their doors.
Are you asking if the information that is reported in this complaint system, can that be used to build a case to support?
Yes.
I would think that the investigation results, if the agencies that are getting the complaints are reporting their findings in the complaint system, and we can demonstrate that pattern of neglect and disregard based on the results of their investigation, then that would be a good supporting piece of evidence towards that effort. But I can't say 100%, yes, it can be used to shut down a business. It's going to be a good supporting piece of evidence, but again, that's going to be based on the investigation results of the agency.
Okay, then my last question.
Yeah.
My last question is how and the why that this has not been implemented on this polluter for all these years.
So you mean like why are you just now hearing about it, and why aren't too many people familiar with the system?
Yes.
So I can't speak for prior to my time with Cali PA. My position was created in March 2021. One of the reasons it was created is so that we had a consistent lead for this program for the complaint system. Prior to my position being created, there was no consistent lead. So it was kind of being passed around by governor appointed attorneys who are obviously juggling multiple different issues, since we have a lot of those in California. When I came on board and took this position, there was a lot of problems with the system because it had been, it didn't have that consistent person monitoring and trying to fix things. So at first it was too broken for me to even train people on. And I've been really focusing on fixing it. And we've come a long ways, even though I still want to go further and make it even better. It's at least to the point where it's functional, that it's giving good information back to the complainant when the complaint is closed, that actually tells them what happened. Before it was just saying like just pretty much nothing, which left the reporting party feeling like nothing happened. So in short, can't speak for prior to March 2021. But since I've been on board, I've been really focusing on trying to fix it so that it can actually have something to present to community members that's functional.
Thank you. We are running a little long here. So if there's, if Ms. Alberti and Brian, you could keep your comments, that would be great. And then we're going to move to, and I see you, Suma, and then we're going to move to Alicia.
Hi, Suma.
Mine is very short.
Hi.
Is Suma going? What are we doing?
Sorry, Brian. I was just saying hi to her.
Oh, okay. Just a quick one here. In the report form that you showed, and this is because this happens at the city.
Yeah.
So I make a complaint and then something happens and then it says closed. Does that mean that it's closed, or does that mean it was passed off to some other agency? And
So because it's not an enforcement tracking system, it means the agency has it, and then they reported their findings saying either we've addressed the complaint, or they could report it saying we've investigated the complaint, further investigation needed, or enforcement action to be taken. This is not meant to track the process, enforcement process. So there could be additional things happening after the complaint's closed. And you're trying to just be a one-stop shop for in the event that a community member doesn't know where their complaint needs to go. They provide the information. We can route it based on the information they provide and make sure it gets to the right agency, and confirm that that agency is doing something.
Not to cut you off, but time is short. But this happens to people in this city because they do these complaints,
Right.
and then it says closed, and they're like, "Well, the trash is still on the street. What's going on?" Right?
Right.
Do I know when I look at this who it's been passed to? Do I know to
It'll
call?
say that. Yeah, it'll say that in the closure notification email that here's the initial agencies it was assigned to, and they made a further referral to a local agency, and it'll give that agency's name.
Okay, thank you.
Verdia, you're on mute. You're on mute, Ms. Alverdia.
Okay. With the encampments, there are a lot of fires that are started in the encampments. And so the fire department is responding to this. Are those fires reported to Cal's environmental part?
You mean like a follow-up on, because a fire would be a 911 call, so it should not be going into the system, but like follow-up afterwards, like what needs to be addressed afterwards, that could be, because it's also used as a tool for another agency to make a referral to Cali, PA. We also have an illegal like dumping database that tells you what agency would be the responsible agency for those cleanup of the encampments. That will just identify to you what that agency is and give you the contact information. That's another tool. But you can also, the fire department, if they wanted to, could use the environmental complaint system to make a referral for further follow-up after the fire's out. But it's not meant to report fires because we wouldn't respond to a fire.
Okay, I got that, but because of their smoke, is because of fire, so that's an air issue. So maybe that's something that can be worked out, since I'm bringing it up, and it may not have been considered.
But
before.
a 911 call or reporting to the Cal OES.
Well, no, the fire department responds to put the fires out.
Right, and the fire department should be making referrals to the appropriate agency within that jurisdiction to address the other issues. But you could use the Cali PA complaint system. It's just going to take longer to get to the complaint or the local agency rather than just going straight to the local agency in the event that this is an emergency, such as a fire. Right, they should be responding quicker, and it would be delayed through the complaint system because it has to go through the proper channels to get to the state agency, who then will review it and get to the local agency.
Great.
I'm not sure if that really answers my question, but I want to move on to the next thing. I did mention the donuts and stuff. Those donuts are caused because they're rubber tires on the car, and so they're burning rubber. And that's coming into our environment. So how do we approach that?
Not sure where the environment, I think it would be, I'd have to look into with the CARB and see if there's a way for it to be reported to CARB as an air quality issue. I'm not quite sure about that one. So I can get back to you if I have your contact information, or provide it to one of the coordinators. But I can get back to you on that because I don't want to give you an incorrect answer. Since that's not a typical complaint that we consider environmental, but it could be an air quality issue.
Well, it is. That's
Right.
why I'm bringing that up and putting it on the table, because both of these issues are things that other city agencies respond to, but it's not coming to you. That doesn't help us. So I'm trying to make my point is that some kind of link needs to be had to support the citizens that are experiencing these fires with the smoke, the donuts, the burning rubber. These are all air quality issues, and they're happening right in our communities, and we are directly impacted. So I'm saying this, can you all create something to pull that information in.
And make that more of like a air quality
Those
category
issues.
for you to select. Yeah, I can look into that and make it more of like a air quality category. You mean like from the drop down menu, something that would make
Yeah,
it.
yeah, like the fires from the encampments and the donuts that are being done.
Yep, I can work with
that's a major impact. Okay, but thank you.
I'll work
gonna
with the Area
short on
Resources Board
time,
and
but I
talk to
did
them
want to
about
put
that
it
too.
on the table.
Yep.
Because when I spoke of the encampments and the donuts, I did not say anything about the impact on the air quality. And that's why I want to come back. And I thought this is the time, especially since you're the one creating programs.
Yeah. It's a good point. I will talk to our CARB and work with them, and we'll work with the air district and see how to best phrase those categories, and we can implement those into the drop down menu.
We're going to wrap this section. I see Suma and Miss Margaret, but we're going to thank Asti for her presentation.
Oh, I want to hear from Suma.
A couple. Okay, I'll be really quick. I just thank you, Hasti, for joining us. And thanks for the wonderful presentation. We brought Hasti on when I was at Cal EPA. We brought her on because of her stellar enforcement record at a certified unified program agency in San Diego. So just by way of context, but I just wanted to touch back on the Schnitzer issue a little bit. You know, one way to think about the Cal EPA complaint system is that it's actually a way to open up enforcement and democratize the process, because in some cases, well, like speaking of Schnitzer, what happened there was that DTSC was doing regular inspections and found violations, which led to the Cal EPA and Attorney General's enforcement action and the settlement agreement, which was lodged in Alameda Superior Court. But the thing about the complaint system, one way to think about it is it allows kind of participatory research, more of a democratization of the enforcement process. So maybe issues that are less prominent or facilities that are less public, visible, can be brought to regulators' attention. So just wanted to add that thought.
All right, Ms. Margaret, want to close this out?
Yeah, one question. So when there's a fire at the encampment, who is supposed to have the authority or should have the authority to make a complaint to Cal EPA? Is it the city, is the county, or Caltrans?
Anybody can enter a complaint in the Cal EPA complaint system. Nobody's required to use the complaint system, so we can't make people use it.
Okay, so even so are you saying that Caltrans does not have to, on its own property, let Cal EPA know there was a fire?
We don't have authority over Caltrans. There is a release reporting requirement under Chapter 6.95, 25510, and other release reporting requirements that would count as like a fire if it involved any kind of hazardous substance. And that would be reported to Cal OES. There's a spill reporting database, and you can also even look up any of the spill reports that were submitted if there's a public database for that too. But that's not under Cal EPA, and Cal EPA has no authority over Caltrans.
So even though that fire has impacted 2 residents, they do not have to report it?
No, they don't have a reporting requirement for Cal EPA.
All right. Your silence is a mic drop moment. Okay. Thanks again to Asti. We're going to move on to Alicia.
Great. Thank you, Randolph. And thanks again, Hasti. I wanted to also just offer that part of, bringing the example of the Cal EPA complaint system is to see that as a model for how we could potentially in the future try to coordinate some of our local enforcement agencies. So whether that's OCDOT in their purview of regulating truck parking, whether that's the city's code enforcement who, sort of enforce the illegal truck yards, whether that's 311, OPD, you know, kind of thinking about, is there a way to coordinate that effort so that the person doesn't have to know, oh, I go to 3011 for this, I go to OCDOT for this, I go to OPD for that, I go to BACMed and CARB for the other things. So that's also to keep in mind for the steering committees to see, is this something that we want to take on and try to kind of champion in some way? Okay. So I don't want to take a lot of time on this. I do want to have a couple of slides that provide the historical background for port-related trucks. One of the follow-up action items or the follow-up items from the April enforcement meeting when we talked about data related to enforcement, and that, you know, we generated the community comments, was that there was an issue about port-related truck enforcement. And so I have a couple of slides that talk about how truck, you know, port truck related enforcement has gone, and just how trucks have changed over time. And I would like to give you the punchline here in these two slides, which is that port trucks have gotten much cleaner over time. So my question to the steering committee is, do we want to prioritize enhancing port related truck enforcement? The other thing I want to say is that we have a couple of examples of the way that enforcement works now. We have Laura from the port to talk about the appointment system, and then we have Helena from CARB to talk about a field event. So again, as you hear these presentations, I want you to think about, is this something that we think is important enough of an issue that we want to follow up on? Okay, so quickly on this slide, if you can go back, I do want to say that the part of this, the point of this slide is talking about the importance of community activism to facilitate change. Starting in 2023, we have, you know, some of the foundational work that EIP did on truck, you know, documenting the impact of drayage trucks, okay? And then sort of that leads into some rule changes through CARB and through, well, mostly through CARB. And so also want to say that there are reports that have been published. There was health risk assessment, there's the ports, Seaport 2020 and beyond plan, and then there's WOCAP that document that the drayage trucks have gotten much, much cleaner over time. Okay, so can you go to the next slide, please? And then the upshot from this slide is showing that if on the left side of the screen, you'll see under the 2005, there's kind of a bar of, and then at the very top of that bar, there's some purple. Okay, so that was the contribution of trucks to the overall emissions. And as you see, when you get to 2020, there's almost no purple on that bar. So that's indicating that the content, you know, the contribution of drayage trucks has shrunk dramatically. Again, upshot here, the key takeaway is that there has been a significant decrease in potential cancer risk from drayage trucks. Next slide, please. So elaborating on this a little bit more, that we have rules in place. So the rules essentially consist of CARB rules. So there's a heavy duty inspection and maintenance program. And then there's a BACMed marine terminal set of rules and guidelines, okay? And so the BACMed rules have a 30-minute idling limit, and then there's a requirement for either an appointment system or extended gate hours. So that's how those rules can be adhered to, okay? And then in terms of enforcement of those rules, again, you know, rules really don't mean anything if nobody's enforcing them in some ways, right? So the enforcement for the CARB rule is that they have periodic field events where they take equipment out. Helena's going to talk about that. And the enforcement for the BACMed, the Air District, marine terminal operators rules is that the complaints are investigated. So again, it's complaint driven. Okay, so I'll transition the presentation now to talk to hear from Laura to talk about how the BACMed rule is implemented. Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia, for that great intro and segue into how the port implements the 30-minute idling rule from the Air District. So at the Oakland Seaport, the marine terminal operators are they basically provide an appointment-based system for container pickups and drop-offs. And these are made by our trucking entities for every activity. And within that appointment, they're allowed to come and pick up again, to either pick up or drop off. And they're allowed to arrive within that specified time frame under that appointment. And this is needed and checked at once they enter the gate at each of the marine terminals. And so this is essentially how it's implemented, how the 30-minute idling rule is implemented at the Oakland Seaport. We also have a portal. The port has kind of integrated information, including the appointment system on our website. You can access it through the portofoakland.com website, and going into our maritime area. Most people, it's commonly known as the e-modal system. And the e-modal system, everyone has essentially an account to book their appointments on top of all the information that is provided, so that people understand the timing of their appointments, and whether or not they are able to access what the queue and wait times are at each of the marine terminals. And that is, again, through the Port of Oakland website. I'd love to, what I'll do is drop in those websites so that I think it's helpful to see that type of information that's provided, so that truckers understand how long the waits are in advance, so that they can actually use that information and book the appropriate appointment to suit their logistical needs. And with that, we would like to extend an invitation to everyone here on the meeting, WOCAP, and participants to the upcoming Zero Emission Port Trucker event. And it's through your advocacy and hard work that these trucks are coming online, and that the port is taking a further step along with all the partners who are making this effort possible. We have an event on September 15th, 10 to 6 p.m. over at the port, essentially at Middle Harbor Shoreline Park. We have several trucking entities who have signed up to test drive these zero emission trucks. And so if you're interested and would like to see, or interested in the demo, please let me know, let us know. And that's what this invitation is here all about. Thank you.
Appreciate it. We're going to keep moving. We're going to hear from Helena from CARP.
Hi there. I'm Helena with California Air Resources Board's Enforcement Division, and I'll be providing a quick update on our June enforcement event in West Oakland. Next slide, please. So in our continued effort to implement the enforcement strategies in the WOCAP, which include increasing the frequency of compliance inspections and achieving compliance with the truck and bus regulation, we conducted a field event for this year on June 28th and 29th of 2023. So prior to the event, we met with Brian and Ms. Margaret to discuss our plan of action and identify potential locations within the community to conduct roadside inspections. And of course, we also coordinate with the California Highway Patrol to identify locations to safely set up inspection sites and pull over trucks for inspection. On the first day, we set up 3 inspection sites at Adeline and 3rd Street, an intersection that had been noted by the community with high truck activity. We were unable to set up our portable emissions acquisition system, or PEACS device, because of technical difficulties. So the enforcement team focused on roadside inspections for both days. And on the second day, we set up 2 inspection sites by the intersection of Maritime and Burma Road, which is another location identified by the community as an area of high truck activity. And then 1 team remained at the Adeline Street and 3rd Street intersection to set up an inspection site. And so overall, if you can go back, overall, we inspected 84 trucks and issued 24 citations across various enforcement programs. Next slide. So this is a summary of the citations that were issued during the field event. When we issue a citation in the field, our citations unit will identify the proper owner of the truck and send them a citation notice letter, which includes instructions on how they can clear the citation and a due date for submitting proof of correction. And the timeline for submitting this proof of correction can vary depending on the citation. It's typically 30 days, but it can be longer, for example, 45 days for the heavy duty inspection and maintenance program. And they're also required to pay a monetary penalty, which varies depending on the enforcement program. Next slide, please. So I didn't, for time's sake, go over all of the different enforcement programs, but we did create a quick summary of the event that details where we were, what we did, the follow-up actions, and a breakdown of the citations and a description of the programs for these citations. So we've shared that with the co-leads in case you're interested in reading more. And of course, you can reach out to me if you have any specific questions after the meeting as well. So that's my presentation.
Appreciate it. Next, we're going to hear from Ying from Bay Area Quality Management District.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Ying Yu with Compliance and Enforcement at the Air District. Do you mind going to the next slide, please? So today I will be sharing with you our Notice of Violation or NOV query tool. To give a little bit of background, our inspectors routinely conduct unannounced inspections at various sites and facilities to ensure the sources are operating in compliance with applicable air quality rules and regulations. And if the inspector discovers a violation, whether it be a violation of air district regulations or permit conditions, they will issue a notice of violation ticket. So to increase transparency and to make that information more accessible to the public and the community, the district is now in the process of developing an NOV query tool, which will provide information on all the NOVs issued in the past 5 years. So if someone is interested in learning how many tickets we issued to Schnitzer, for example, in the past 5 years, and for what regulation, they can get details from this query tool. It is searchable by keywords such as the facility name, zip code, and city. So it's not just within the West Oakland area, it's for the entire Air District Bay Area region. And you can also sort the data from oldest to newest or sort by penalty amount. Some examples of the features include dates of the NOV's issuance, the site, facility name and address, the regulations cited, status of violation, like whether it's resolved or it's still pending, and then the penalty amount. This tool is currently not yet officially launched, so unfortunately I cannot do a demo today, but we are expecting this tool to be launched by the end of September. So very, very soon this will be up on our website for people to access. Next slide, please. And just to give a little bit more information, the NOV query tool will be able to show all the NOVs that were issued within the last 5 years. And this slide shows some examples of NOV types that we can take enforcement actions on, such as no authority to construct, no permit to operate, excess emissions, public nuisance, violations of permit conditions, visible emissions that exceed regulatory threshold, or administrative violations. And this is not a complete list. So basically any violations of air district regulations, if a ticket is issued, that would be searchable on this tool. Next slide, please. Okay, so this slide, just switching gears a little bit to talk a little bit about the West Oakland complaint data. So this slide shows the complaint data for the West Oakland community from January 1st, 2023 to August 31st, 2023. In this 8-month period, we received a total of 42 complaints. Most of them were odor complaints, as you can see on the complaint type breakdown on the bar graph on the slide. And then we were able to confirm 15 of those complaints, and that's a relatively high confirmation rate. For each complaint received, we conduct a thorough investigation and follow up with the complainant after the investigation. And then based on the complaints data, we are also doing more targeted inspections and patrols at facilities that received complaints. In this case, it's mostly Schnitzer. And lastly, whenever our inspection staff discovers any instances of non-compliance, they take enforcement actions by issuing a notice of violation ticket. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Ying. All right.
Are you looking for questions or not?
We are going to take Miss Margaret first, and then there was a lot covered, and I know we kind of went through a few presenters, and so we will take some questions on what we've heard this evening. Miss Margaret.
I can wait. I can wait in the queue and let somebody else go before me because I have spoke quite a few times. Who else has their hand up? Because I can't see.
No other hands. Do we have any other?
I have a couple quick questions.
There are some questions in the chat.
Yeah, and I've asked if any of the presenters have responses. There's some great questions in the chat. If you have any that you want to immediately respond to, please do. Hear from Jimmy.
Yeah, hey everyone, this is Jimmy O'Day. Just a response to Alicia's question on trucks being a primary concern with the emissions going down just on the per truck basis. My experience is yes. I mean, you go down Middle Harbor, anytime there's that 1.5 mile long queue from the Adeline Bridge down to Middle Harbor Shoreline Park, and that's a place you don't want to be breathing air. And I think the enforcement data maybe supports that, just with a high number of citations per 84 trucks. So to me, it seems like definitely the truck idling enforcement is still a pretty pertinent issue for our community.
Others before we hear from Ms. Margaret? Brent?
Yeah, I had a similar question, which was as far as both the impact of drayage trucks, and this was back to the first presentations, but as far as the impact of drayage trucks, how do we know where those impacts are, and are they more out at the port or within the community? Because similar to the last comment, it seems like there still is a lot of truck activity in the community. And so how do we actually start to get the metric to reinforce sort of the claims that are happening at a higher modeling level? And I was similarly wondering if that could be done for some of the idling, because I assume with the check-in and check-out software that you were talking about, Laura, there is maybe a way to say like, this person actually was waiting 4 hours, because I know it's getting more efficient, but I also know from truckers there's long waits. So I was just curious if there's ways to leverage some of those tools that exist to try to infer some of this data, or to try to get other sort of truck movement data and things like that from Streetlight to kind of actually quantify these things.
Well, I will say that I should have qualified that these appointments, these are mandatory at the gates. And so when trucks are waiting for 2 hours, for example, they are essentially not out of compliance. They are in compliance. They are not breaking any 30-minute idling rule. So that's important for everyone to have just a baseline knowledge about. And I think at the end of the day, there's idling, and then there is you overlay that with truck compliance, engine compliance. And the recent CARB enforcement report shows that there was just, if you pull up the CARB enforcement map, it's a tool that reports out how many trucks were inspected. And in the recent report, there was 725 trucks with 2 citations, 2 emissions related citations. And so the report essentially says that trucks are 99% compliant with emission standards. And again, these are the cleanest trucks around. And so the report done by CARB seems to be a community-based one where now you're tracking what the activities are over in West Oakland proper boundaries. So I thought I'd make those lines of distinction so that people also have that baseline knowledge. Now there's what is happening over in Maritime and those maritime operations and the trucks entering there, and the 99% compliance stated in those reports. And then again, the enforcement June activity taken in West Oakland proper that don't seem to be in alignment. And a lot of those trucks, we don't know if that report identifies whether those drayage trucks are not drayage, how kinds of trucks. But nonetheless, it identifies that type of activity, which is, it should not understate by saying so is not underestimating the impact they have by being there. And so, yeah, there's lots of tools, Brent, the port provides lots of data on how long the queues are. We provide cameras and communication so that containers or logistics firms can schedule just in time and make just in time deliveries.
Great.
And so that's, on the maritime side. And Brent, if your question is about how can residents leverage that data, we can, I'm not sure exactly if that's what you meant.
Yeah, that would be great. And just how that data might be being used to improve the emission models or knowing what's happening. But I guess that's what you're saying is happening in that CARB draft. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Laura. And again, there's some great questions and some responses in the chat. So please take a look at those. We're going to take Ms. Margaret before moving to meet in the town hall. Ms. Margaret.
All right, real quick, couple things. Once a truck goes into the terminal property, yes, they could idle or keep moving for 30 minutes. Once they're on the streets of Oakland, which include the streets of the port, is 5 minutes. There is no standing enforcement patrol of any enforcement to tell a truck driver to turn off his engine when they're on the street. There is nothing. There's not even a joint enforcement especially between hours of 12 and 1 when they're queuing up to get into the gate. And the last thing, there is no stationary monitor at the port, at a terminal, by any agencies for monitoring the air quality for those trucks behind the gate or inside the terminal land. There is no such thing. So one of the recommendations that I would like to put on the table, that we have some kind of joint enforcement of agencies doing regular patrols at a certain time, especially between the hours of 11, 12, 1, and 2, to be patrolling the streets of West Oakland as part of enforcement of violators. Since the port has not, nor the city has suspiciously enforced that or put that type of a program together, I'm asking that the agencies come together, including Bay Air Quality, come together to have such a patrol on the issue of idling, and also to be more supporting of air monitoring. What is the pollution coming inside the terminals from the trucks that are idling to try to move to get to deliver or receiving a container?
Great. Thanks, Ms. Margaret.
I don't seem to be able to raise my hand anymore for some reason, Randolph, but I think this all comes down to one thing. I'm sorry to jump in like this, but if the air district is responsible for this appointment system, the appointment system waiver is the problem. Laura is absolutely correct. Trucks lined up with appointments for 2 hours are not out of compliance. They are in compliance. The waiver of the 30-minute idling rule based on having an appointment is what the problem is. It's been the problem since the appointment systems were created. And the air district, if they're the ones who run the appointments, that's what I heard Alicia say. That appointment system needs to be reviewed and readdressed, because that's why we have 2-hour lines. If there wasn't a waiver, people would be getting tickets and they would do something about it.
Alicia?
I just wanted to say that I'm talking about guidelines, Brian. So it's not that BACMed is, you know, kind of responsible in the way that, I mean, we're saying that you have options to comply with the rules for 30-minute idling and for an appointment system. And so, you know, I'm sort of out of my depth a little bit in terms of, you know, how it works, but my understanding is that the enforcement, you know, is complaint based. So I don't think that like the port or that BACMed reviews the port's appointment system. So it is absolutely the port's appointment system, and it's required as part of the guidelines for the terminal operators that BACMed issues.
I understand.
Okay.
But by having an appointment system, the terminal operator is no longer held to the 30-minute idling rule. The trucks can line up forever.
I just want to be clear on who would need to make the changes, because, you know, and it could be a partnership, like BACMed helps, you know, provide supplemental data and things like that. The port do the appointment system, but it's not really the BACMed's leading.
It's BACMed's waiver. BACMed says it's a 30-minute rule, but if you have an appointment system, the rule is waived. It's not a guidance, it's the rule. It's how the rule was written. I was around when they wrote it. And it's never worked correctly. And neither CARB nor BACMed wants to address it. There wouldn't be appointment systems if there wasn't a waiver. That's why the appointment systems exist, so that the terminal operators can circumvent the 30-minute idling rule. It is not more efficient. The trucks wait just as long. And the agencies have been unwilling to address this issue. I don't know why, because it's the 30-minute rule, and no one gets a ticket for waiting for being in line longer than 30 minutes. That should be the rule.
Gotcha. Thank you kindly. All right, thank you all for one of the presentations, and thank you for helping us get back on track. We're just about time. The town hall planning. Meet.
We're not seeing any slides, just as a heads up.
Just about that.
All right. If you can go to the next slide, that would be amazing. So, hi everyone. My name is Meet Panchal, and I'm the community engagement lead for WOCAP. for those of you who don't know me, but I just wanted to give another update from last month's meeting. We were still deciding some dates for the town hall meeting and the venue, but we do have a date and a time now in order, which is November 5th. And it's going to be from noon to 3 p.m. And we are still confirming one of the venues, which is Deformery Park. And but Randolph.
Sorry about that. All right, continue. I'll get it.
But I can just talk about some of the goals which we had decided was for this town hall specifically was going to be to basically communicate the AB 617 progress to the community members, and also provide an opportunity for the residents to participate in this, to continue participating in the WOCAP steering committee. And some of the format which we came about was to have a keynote speaker such as Christina Garcia, who has been there since the start, but also kind of have information tables and booths and some activity stations where maybe we could have some interactive use of the WOCAP tracker where there could be some hands-on activities, or maybe some sort of a stovetop a cooking demonstration. So all of these activity stations are still going to be flushed out later on. But this is the idea so far we have for the format, and it's going to be like a World Cafe style. Next slide, please. And some of the table topics we've kind of planned out was about the WOCAP. About the WOCAP, like the history and the context, such as, and also the port and freight, transit bike and walk initiatives, and health and living buffers. These are actually taken from the WOCAP itself, and we wanted to make sure that these are displayed for folks who are not familiar with the WOCAP, and also kind of get some hands-on activities or posters or interactive tools which can be used to make them understand where we are in the process. And so some of the other table topics we also kind of discussed, which were such as the incentive programs, which BACMED might be doing, or CARB, or EBCE. And also discussing a little bit of the programs, or some of the agencies who are doing their own programs, but also what WOIB is doing in terms of the community programs based on the research and analysis we've been doing for so long. And a little fun table for air monitoring and science, where folks can maybe learn how to read an air monitor or learn how to install an air monitor and do local air monitoring was also an idea. Next slide, please. So in the next coming months, WOIP is going to be working on at least the outreach materials, and I would also hope that some of the steering committee members out here would kind of spend 30 minutes of their time doing some of the outreach once we develop those materials. And it could be in terms of emails or social media, or even your next door post. So kind of like encouraging folks to come and participate and be out there, at the same time have fun, get food, meet everybody, socialize, all which would be wonderful. And we would also expect later on to have some of the steering committee members to even do some volunteering in terms, and that would be laid out later on. But we are doing a next town hall planning meeting, which is upcoming this month, and it's on September 19th. So those of you who can make it to the WOIP office, we'll continue to plan and flush out this November town hall meeting. And as always, there's going to be food, there's going to be lots of fun at the same time to plan this out and hopefully make this much better. And some musicians probably as well. And next slide, please. And I just wanted to preface again, and I think Nicole has already mentioned this, there is West Oakland link, the meeting happening next week. And if someone could share the link in the chat again for registration. We would appreciate, folks to join in, chime in. If you know someone who's in West Oakland resident, this is going to be really impactful for them, and also the bike path and the bike and the walking path is going to be crucial for folks who live there. Yeah, especially for those who walk and bike in West Oakland as well. So and that's about it. That's what I have to say. Thank you.
Great, thanks. We're going to wrap with a survey, but we do want to go back. Helena, actually, we skipped over one slide, and we just want to take a little time to go back to that slide. Helena, can you tell me which slides you'd like to?
So it's 51, Randolph.
51.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll kind of open it by saying that the other topic that was brought up in April was after hours enforcement. So how are our enforcement agencies responding to complaints, or are they responding to complaints that come in after hours, whether that's early, before enforcement activities start, before the normal business day starts, or on the weekends? And so we did have several discussions, CAR in BACMed, and really have kind of understand that we need more documenting data of the issue, but that's just to, the slide went away. So just to say that the conversations are ongoing around that, but Helena also would like to offer something.
Yeah, thanks, Alicia. So after I spoke to the diesel enforcement team at CARB about what our options are to be able to start collecting data. And we actually now have the option to do a stationary peaks setup, which is the portable emissions acquisition system, which is essentially our screening tool to flag potentially high emitting trucks. And we are able to pair that with searchable license plate data because the device also has an automatic license plate reader. So the goal of this device, the Peaks device, is to flag these potentially high emitters and subject them to further inspections, either via roadside or follow up with an audit of the company. So we are exploring the idea of a stationary Peaks device at the port at one of the terminals. So we are planning on speaking to the Port of Oakland. I already reached out to Laura, and we'll be talking to the port's environmental programs and planning division, hopefully sometime in the next week, to see where it's possible, because we need power connection to be able to do this and to work out the logistics. But we would also, of course, want to work with the community to identify and prioritize which terminal, if it's possible to set up, we should prioritize, and how we could either potentially rotate to be able to collect data from different terminals. So those details are yet to be worked out, but I just wanted to present that as an option that we're exploring. And that's all.
So much, Helena. All right. We are getting close to the end. And we're just going to wrap with a survey. So if you have time, there is a survey link in the chat. And Nicole, do you want to give us a prompt on this?
Yes, the prompt or the nudge here is this data, right? This feedback impacts these meetings, right? And your participation in these meetings is what makes it a community-led process. So we want to hear where are opportunities for us to be better, and surveys allow us to get better faster. So help us out, please.
Great. So again, the link to the survey is in the chat. And also just to go back, I just wanted to go back also to Meet's presentation on the town hall. That town hall is for the community. And so if you have any ideas that, you know, kind of would strengthen that town hall and make it more valuable to, you know, people who don't know anything about WOCAP, or people who know everything about WOCAP and they need a more substantive kind of content. Please provide those comments and suggestions. The team is meeting regularly and we would love to hear from you. And I see Richard brought in his expert. That's awesome. And again, it was no rush. If there are any, we've got 3 minutes. So if you have any additional comments as you're filling out the survey, speak now or forever hold your peace.
I want to make sure that for our next meetings, either in the Weeds meeting or in the Coley's meeting, that there is a full discussion about the joint effort of having policing patrol at the port and on the streets of South and on the streets of Oakland. And during those critical hours where we know there is a large impact of trucks.
Okay, we can start that conversation whenever you'd like. That in the Weeds meeting. So if you'd like to start it tomorrow, we can start it tomorrow and find a placeholder for it. And I'll double back with you just to get that agenda item correctly noted. All right, what are we gonna do with our 2 minutes here? I know somebody has something. Any additional announcements related to WOCAP? Oh, you got it. All right. Did you all fill out your surveys? Please do. I'm dying here. I could also give you back your 45 seconds. All right.
I do have one announcement. The PBS program Nova is coming to West Oakland and do a story about EIP.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's a fantastic.
And the end of the month of September and the first week of November. So steering committee members and community members be looking for a call for about an interview.
That is fantastic. So again, we just want to thank all of our presenters. We want to thank the public. We want to thank our steering committee members. Really appreciate all the work that you're doing. And we will be signing off and we look forward to seeing you next month.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Randolph.
Thank you. Thanks, Randolph.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.
All righty. And stop. Oh, and stop.